Intel, ticker INTC. It's a stock I do want to throw some analysis on because we weren't really posting too much when this stock came into a tradable level. But again, if you are in our Discord, it is in the description. We did post this in here as soon as it happened. But what you can see with Intel is it did come into what we have put as a line here, IPO VWAP. So what this is essentially an anchored VWAP. And again, all an anchored VWAP is a volume weighted average price from a certain date in time. And in this case, it's from the IPO of Intel. So back in 1986. So this is the fair value price. Essentially, you can think of the since IPO VWAP or IPO, anchored VWAP is essentially the fair value price of the stock since it has IPO'd. And what we can see is obviously, I mean, even earlier this year, you had Intel up at this $50 price. Right now, we went down to all the way of we went to a low of 1870 or 1880. The fair value, so the since IPO VWAP was sitting at around 1964. I think it was at the time 1960. Yeah, I think it was actually basically that anyway. But anyway, the price came down into here again. You barely ever kind of get these larger companies coming down to there since IPO VWAP. But again, these are normally going to be great opportunities. You go anywhere back in time and you see when does it come back to this level. You'll normally see buying pressure come in, and again, if it does go below it, it doesn't tend to be for very long. So again, and the first time you come into it, that's where you normally get those 9 bounces. So as a trading opportunity, that's there. From an investing or trading opportunity, you can look for the longer term play as well. But again, if we go back, we can just keep going back every time. And when does it come down to it? It doesn't really come back all that often, but again, another great bounce opportunity. And again, now we're actually near the IPO. So basically, it just shows how strong Intel was. We touched it once in the 90s or 1990. We kind of shied it coming into 2002, but we didn't quite get it. And again, don't forget that with the dot-com bubble time. And we still couldn't come down to its fair value. And then if we go across, we came back to it in the financial crisis, so 08, 09 time. Bounced out of there, and now we're coming back down to it for the first time. Again, we didn't even come back down here in the COVID crash. So again, this can be two things. Some people get scared by this because it's starting to show the company is not keeping up with times, and the AMD is definitely taking over compared to Intel. But it can also just show you that it is a good buying opportunity. And again, fair value since IPO. Do you think there's still upside for Intel? I think there definitely is, especially if you're kind of grabbing it at this fair value. And again, even since we've hit there, we've already done a nice 12% bounce. So again, we may potentially come back and retest it, and if so, that could be a nice entry along. But again, anywhere value near here is normally going to be an all right look, especially from an investment standpoint. But now we can cut over to the deviations to kind of help us pinpoint the entries. Again, this is our longer term outlook. If we compare it with our short term outlook, we can normally get some really nice entries. So what we can see on Intel, we're currently at between kind of fair value and its first deviation. This is at around 21.40. So if we can break and hold this, we do have a good chance to then push up to $29, which would be fair value, and also kind of fill this gap from their earnings. So that would be it. But if we do come down to the flip side again, okay, so our deviations are down at $14. So this is essentially saying, well, this would be a good buying opportunity essentially from a standard deviation perspective. But again, is that likely to come all the way down here? From a standard deviation perspective, then yes, it is somewhat likely, because that's only our first deviation from the 6 month and our second deviation from the 1 year. So again, we have both of these levels. If you understand the second deviations, that is 95% of data should trade above that. So again, there's not a massive chance it comes down to there. But from the first deviation, 68% of data should trade above there. So again, it shows that there's definitely a chance it could come down to here. But again, when you pair it with the since IPO anchor VWAP being at 1960, there isn't much chance. Like, I wouldn't be looking for a move that low. To me, the great buying opportunity comes at that anchored VWAP to look for longs. And again, then what are targets we can use? I would definitely have already hit that first target if we have longed from here. Again, on my investment account, I did just kind of take some profits out, just because if we do dip lower, again, you always like to kind of take the profits when they're there. So again, we did take some profits as we came into that 21.40, because again, that is our first deviation, so it acts as a resistance. But if we come higher, 29 key resistance, 31 key resistance, 36, 39. These are all very far off. And again, I don't know if you would target them right away, but I would be looking at 29 as that kind of upside target if this level can hold. Again, if this level can't hold, expect to move back down to these lows where we'll come and test that anchor up it again. And then again, we'll see if we can hold it for a third touch, because again, we have touched it here for the first touch, second touch. If we get a third, again, we would be looking more likely to break. But again, it's not a straight divergence because we haven't made lower lows. But again, definitely the momentum is not there to the downside anymore. But overall, quite long bias on Intel, especially if you can get long at 1960s. And again, a nice target would kind of be that $29 level, which would give you 10 points of upside on $19, which would be a 48% upside move you're roughly looking at on a stock like Intel.